Welcome back. A South Wales couple who've spent 15 years trying to find out whether their son suffered brain damage during an experiment at a Cardiff hospital believe they're a step closer to finding out the truth. They believe their son was part of a research project being carried out by controversial paediatrician Professor David Southall. South Wales Police have stepped up their inquiry into the parents' allegations. Professor Southall was banned from child protection work for 3 years in 2004 by the General Medical Council. He was found guilty of serious professional misconduct after accusing solicitor Sally Clark's husband of murdering their children. He made the allegation after watching Stephen Clark being interviewed in a television programme. In 1991, Ben Hollisey-McLean was admitted to the University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff for overnight sleep tests. After the first night of testing, his parents say their son had changed forever.
The little boy, we got back the following morning, just had no energy. Ben loved his three-wheeler trike, and from that day on he couldn't even work out how to get on it. His coordination was different. Ben had problems before that night, you know, we're not disputing that, but the child we had back was a very different little boy.
Tonight we can reveal South Wales Police have stepped up their investigation into what happened that night. The Public Protection Unit, based at Cardiff Central Police Station, has sent letters to other parents whose children may have come into contact with Professor David Southall to find out if they have been injured. Ben was born with a rare condition, which meant that sometimes he would stop breathing at night and have to be resuscitated. It was called sleep apnea. His parents relied on an alarm system to warn them when it was happening.
I was watching a programme one morning and I saw Professor Southall on this programme talking about his wonderful monitor, if you like, how it, rather than telling you when the child had stopped breathing, like the existing apnea alarms, it told you, it warned you when it was going to happen. And I thought that maybe that would be better for Ben because it meant that we could intervene before he actually had an apnea attack. So initially, yes, it was at my request that we went to see Southall, which is pretty ironic, really.
Professor Southall was then based at the Royal Brompton Hospital in London. He conducted breathing tests on Ben, but said there was nothing wrong with him. He later accused his parents of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, claiming they'd exaggerated Ben's breathing problems.
Well, I was distraught. We've always been a very caring, loving family. The thought of abusing our child, or anybody else's child for that matter, is totally absurd.
Professor Southall wanted to carry out further breathing tests on Ben, but Ben's parents were worried these tests might be harmful. They say they were threatened with care proceedings and forced to sign an agreement for Ben to have diagnostic tests, but they say they did not see a list of tests that would be carried out.
Certainly on the night of the 18th of July, Ben was alone in a side room with a technician who was employed by Professor Southall, who had no ordinary contract to be in the hospital, who by his own admission was not qualified and experienced enough to assess if Ben was coming to any harm or any damage, and also a nurse that had previously worked at the Brompton Hospital. And this in itself is a highly unusual, if not bizarre, situation. But there's never been an explanation. One hopes that as the police inquiry develops, that the police will require them to offer an explanation as to how this could occur.
We asked the Cardiff and Vale NHS Trust what happened that night, but they told us they can't discuss details of cases which are subject to a police inquiry. Ben's parents believe he was used in an experiment by Professor Southall. They've spent 15 years gathering Ben's medical records. They were horrified to find amongst them a research protocol written by Professor Southall. It detailed a test which involved stopping a child breathing for 10 seconds on 5 occasions. It's not clear if Ben was given the test, but his file included a letter making it clear parents would not be asked to give written consent. The research was approved by the Ethics Committee at the Royal Brompton Hospital.
When I read Protocol 8502, I think devastated is the word, because I really believe that is what happened to my son. and for any mother reading what was happening to the children, and to know that that happened to Ben and the effect that it had on him. Yeah, it was devastating, it was traumatic, it was shocking.
They've unravelled the meaning of a code which appears on some of Ben's documents. It began with the letters SC and had been puzzling them for years. In 1996, they discovered other families who'd come into contact with Professor Southall had been given similar codes. It's now clear he'd been collecting information about children with breathing problems like Ben's, and SC stood for the word special case.
We can now show that in September 1989, Ben was given an SC file, SC2026, along with, it would appear, every child who was ever referred to Professor Southall for assessment of sleep apnea or whatever. You can only assume from that files can only belong to a doctor if they are his research files.
As they gathered documents from the special case file, they were horrified to find it contained non-medical information about the family.
More worryingly really is a poem that I wrote for my sons and my husband that I dedicated to them in I think 92, called The Price of Innocence, A Cry from the Heart, and Southall's got that in the file, and we really have no idea how he came to have it or why worryingly it should be in the file. The SC file in part to me feels like a trophy.
What happened with Ben, in one sense, probably isn't unique. The circumstances by which it came about probably was a little unusual, but at the end of the day we know from what information we found and what's available to us that the research that David Southall was involved in affected many thousands of children.
There's evidence that special case files were kept on these children as well by Professor Southall.
We know there were some 4,000 or 5,000 special case files. We don't know how many babies were in each experiment. There were 7,000 in one of the sets of experiments.
John Hemming MP is on a parliamentary Munchausen syndrome by proxy review committee, which was set up to look at guidelines used for referring children to social services. He's querying Professor Southall and his research into breathing difficulties and sudden infant death syndrome after receiving complaints from Ben's family and other families.
Professor Southall should be written to and instructed by the General Medical Council to tell people if he has special case files, and if they do, to give that information to the people about whom it is held.
It's believed some of these files are still being stored at the North Staffordshire NHS Trust. They declined to take part in this programme. Professor Southall also declined. He's always denied his treatment has harmed any child. We can reveal the GMC has asked Davina Hollisey-McLean to give evidence at a hearing against Professor Southall.
I think there are 4 other complaints with ours. Ours certainly relates to the SC files rather, and the fact that Southall kept them, that they contained original documents which should have been in medical records that aren't. Who knows what's going to happen? I suppose it depends whether the GMC thinks that's right or wrong.
She's been told it'll be next month, but the GMC has declined to confirm the date or charges he will face. Ben's parents have had so many doors shut in their faces. They believe the only way they'll finally get answers is through a public inquiry.
Everybody seems far more wanting to bury it than they do to bring it to light, and that's why I feel at the end of all this, there has to be a public inquiry to hold everyone accountable, really.
They're hoping the intervention of the MP will bring them closer to the truth.
What's important is this is properly investigated, everything is resolved, and those people who are responsible are held to account. Frankly, I'm shocked at the way in which there seems to be turning of blind eyes in the Department of Health. The GMC is doing something, but it's a little bit too little, and it's a lot too late and a little bit too little.
Ben has just celebrated his 21st birthday. His family are now in their 16th year, struggling to find out what happened to him.
It's been very frustrating, very upsetting. There have been times when I felt like throwing in the towel, and then I see Ben come downstairs and he says, "I love you, mother dear," and that gives me the fight again. But But it has been hard, you know, you've knocked on doors, had them slammed in your faces, you think you're halfway there, you think you're halfway up the mountain with the GMC, and they come along and they knock you 10 paces back down into the gutter again. It's been a really hard struggle.
Yeah, Dee has committed pretty much 16 years of her life to this now. Most every day is spent accumulating information, canvassing people, informing people, writing, emailing, phoning, and I just feel that she's not lived the life she's been chosen for herself. We certainly haven't as a family, and I really feel it's time that this was brought to a conclusion.
Ben's parents now just want to know the truth, so the whole family can finally move on with their lives. We'll bring you more on that story as it develops.